31 days of October 2017. Let's kick this shit. What's up, guys? Welcome to the third annual 31 Days of October. If you don't know what that is, every week in October, I'm going to talk about the horror movies that I watched over the past week. And I'm going to have some guests every week. So this is going to be really fun. It's going to be interactive. And you can post in the comments and you can play along too. And you can post what you watched. And this is a great way for everybody to just feed off of each other, find out what we all watched, and maybe find some, recommendations that we might not have heard of. So anyway, first off, I got three special guests to kick it off. I have Zach from Cavern of Terror. I have Vicki from Nightmare Maven, who is a first time. And I also have Tim from Reviewed Later. So excited to get this going. And if you're wondering what my background looks like, because it's just really plain and simple, most of you know I'm in the process of moving. It's horrible. I made a promise that 31 Days of October 2017 is happening. What does that mean? It's not easy at all. So I'm doing what I can to get this out. My background might not be as active as it was last year, but we're still gonna have a lot of fun. I actually have my letterbox list here pulled up so that way I can just go along and show you guys what I watched. But first off, before I tell you what I watched, we're gonna kick it off with Zach from the Cavern of Terror. So, Zach, tell them what you watched.
Hello and welcome to the Cavern of Terror.
Hey guys, I'm Zach and welcome to the Cavern of Terror. I'm privileged and honored to be on the first episode of my buddy Lee's 31 Days of October 2017. If you guys watched Lee's 31 Days of October video 2016, you'll remember that I was on the first episode of that one as well. It's sort of becoming a tradition for me to be on the first episode. The first episode videos are sort of the primer week. We start on the 25th of September and we end on the 1st of October, as I'm sure Lee already told you. So what did I watch from the 25th to the 1st? Let's get into it. First up on the 25th, I watched Burying the X, directed by Joe Dante, starring Anton Yelgin, Ashley Greene, and Alexandra Daddario. Sweet, nailed it. Burying the X is a really cool movie about this guy that's pretty much in a very awkward, strained relationship with the girl that he probably shouldn't be with. One day she dies, and then she comes back. Yeah, it gets weird. If you guys like Sam Raimi films like The Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness, I think you're gonna really dig Burying the X. On the 26th of September, I watched Holliston Season 1. If you guys don't know what Holliston is, it is yet another horror comedy, but this is a TV show. It used to run on FearNet back in the day, along with Todd and the Book of Pure Evil. I remember this back when I was in high school, but I never really had the opportunity to check it out. It's created by Adam Green, who brought us the Hatchet trilogy, Frozen, and Digging Up the Marrow. It also stars Adam Green in one of the lead roles. His best friend is Joe, played by Joe Lynch, who is also a horror director who directed Wrong Turn 2. Rounding out the rest of the cast, you have Laura Ortiz, who played Ruby in the Hills Have Eyes remake, Corey English, Dee Snider from Twisted Sister, and Otis Urangis from Gwar. If you guys have not seen Holliston Season 1 or Season 2, I highly recommend it. Especially if you love horror comedy. You get guts, gore, cameos, and they break down the fourth wall. Also, on the 26th of September, I watched Chrome Skull Laid to Rest 2. Chrome Skull is a recent modern slasher and is also the sequel to Laid to Rest. I've been meaning to review this film for a while, but I just haven't had time to get into it yet with my Scream series, but I had a lot of fun with Laid to Rest 2. It's slick and very well shot, and Brian Austin Green actually gives a pretty menacing performance here. It's the darkest I've ever seen him get. They took all the elements that I think made 80s and early 90s slashers good and modernized it, and they nailed it. Moving on to the 27th of September, I watched Rob Zombie's Lords of Salem. Hold on to your seats, guys, because I think this is going to be a little bit controversial. I think Lords of Salem is Rob Zombie's best film. Yeah, I said it. Think about all the things that you didn't like in Rob Zombie's Halloween. They're not in Lords of Salem. I actually found myself mesmerized by this story. It was very gripping. Lords of Salem is a throwback to 70s shock horror. This film goes to very disturbing and demented places, and you're gonna want to look away, but you can't. This also has one of the best performances I've seen from Sheri Moon Zombie and Jeff Daniel Phillips. They're both really good here. Also on the 27th, I watched Feast. Guys, this movie was insane. It's the first creature feature that I have on this list, and this movie is bloody. Very, very bloody. If you're a fan of Dead Alive from Peter Jackson and splatter horror, then you're really gonna like Feast. It also went a ton of different directions with characters. Like, they come up with these little title screens that show what may or may not happen to the characters in the movie, and then they do a complete 180. I thought it was really cool. The creature designs are top notch in this, and the effects are insane. Like I said before, they're very good, and if you like creature features, you definitely need to check out Feast. I thought it was a good time. The last movie that I watched on the 27th of September is The Collector. The cinematography is beautiful in this film. I love the colors. The entire movie pretty much takes place at night, and it's just gorgeous to look at. Along with the atmosphere with the thunderstorm and the rain, I really enjoyed that as well. Plus, Josh Stewart's performance is amazing. He's one of my favorite television actors. He's been on Criminal Minds for years as a supporting character, and he just knocks it out of the park in The Collector. I haven't seen The Collection yet, but I know he comes back in that one. Spoilers, but if you haven't seen The Collection, it came out a few years ago. Still need to add that one to the collection. The Collection. This killer is super creepy, very inventive. It's also written by one of the co-writers of Saw 3, I believe. Marcus Dunstan, he directed this as well, and you can see the Saw influences, but it's not too overbearing. You can definitely separate this from Saw, but you can see a little bit of the influence there. The Collector is a really solid movie, and I definitely suggest it. On the 28th of September, I watched The Tall Man, starring Jessica Biel. I've had this movie on my shelf for months, and I haven't checked it out, and I figured that this was the perfect time to finally do it. And I was expecting a slasher movie and got something completely different. The twist here is pretty shocking, but it was executed way too early in the film, and it kind of suffered for the rest of it because of that. Not saying that this is a bad movie, but it's kind of boring at some points. I think they pulled the trigger way too early on the twist, which I'm not going to spoil for you, and it's not in any way a bad movie, but it's not a great movie either. Also on the 28th, I watched The Devil's Candy. Wait a minute. Something's wrong here. I can't talk about The Devil's Candy without having my hair down. This movie is every metalhead's dream. I mean, there are so many metal references here, and I'm pretty sure Lee covered it in his review, which I remember. Thanks for the shout out, buddy. And I can't wait to review this film myself because I have a lot of views on it, and it's also like Lords of Salem. It's very gripping. You want to look away, but you can't. It just sucks you in. Also, very good cinematography and color. Ethan Embry is amazing in this movie. Really, really good. I really enjoyed his performance. I can't wait to see him in other things. He was an actor that was kind of big in the 90s, went away for a while. He was even on The Walking Dead in season 6, and I don't think anyone remembers his character. I like the themes of The Devil's Candy, and I'll definitely watch it again. On the 29th, I watched Friday the 13th, 2009. I told my subscribers this story quite a few times, but I saw the Friday the 13th remake in theaters back in 2009. and I absolutely hated it. I was a huge fan of the original series, and I thought that this one was a little bit too much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003. It's directed by the same director, Marcus Nispel, who also directed that movie. It's done by the same production company, Platinum Dunes, so there are some similarities. It's done by same cinematography. It's done by Daniel Pearl, who did the original Friday the 13th, I believe, and the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the remake of this one. But something clicked after I got it on Blu-ray. They did a really good job here. I don't know why I didn't like it back in the day, but I love it now. They took basically 3 or 4 stories from the original Friday the 13th and combined them into one remake. One of the main characters kind of brings down the whole ship in Trent, but some of the other characters like Chewie and Lawrence help bring it up, and there are some other scenes that would definitely help bring this movie up too. Derek Mears is my Jason Voorhees. The dude is a beast. On the 30th, I watched Urban Legend. Urban Legend is one of those movies that I have to watch every October. It has the atmosphere of this time of the year. Plus, it's directed by a very underrated director in Jamie Blanks. I actually found out when he was writing this script for Urban Legend, it was actually supposed to be a sequel to I Know What You Did Last Summer. I definitely suggest that you check out Urban Legend if you haven't seen it. Finally, on the 1st of October, I watched Halloween H2O, 20 years later. I actually posted on Killer Flicks not too long ago that Halloween H2O is my favorite Halloween film, and it hasn't changed. And I think that Halloween H2O is the horror fans' horror film. There's so many people involved in this movie that are cornerstones in horror and love horror. Steve Miner, who directed H2O, directed Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3. Patrick Lussier did the editing. He also did the editing on all 4 of the Scream films and directed the My Bloody Valentine remake. The score is done by John Ottman, who had directed Urban Legend's Final Cut and scored countless other horror films. There was also additional music by Marco Beltrami, who had done the Scream series and countless other horror films. I've never been the biggest Halloween fan, but H2O pulls me in. I really enjoy this movie. Alright guys, that's it. That's everything I watched from September 25th to October 1st. Lee, I just want to thank you one more time for letting me in 31 days of October 2017. I really appreciate it, man. Can't wait to be in 31 days of October 2018.
Thank you so much, Zach. Those sound like some delicious choices. Looking forward to checking those out. Next up, we're going to check out Vicki from Nightmare Maven. Let's see what she watched. Vicki, take it away.
Hey everyone, my name is Vicki, also known as Nightmare Maven here on YouTube, and I'm here to share with you guys what I've been watching this past week for Drumdums 31 Days of October. So before I start anything, I have to say a huge thank you to Lee for inviting me to be a part of this year. I really appreciate it. Lee's channel is one of the channels that I look up to for inspiration for my own channel, so it's a huge honor to be on here in front of his audience, so thank you so much, Lee. Now let's get into what I've been watching this week because it's a lot. So the first thing that I saw this week was Ghost House, which stars Scout Taylor Compton, and it's about her and her boyfriend who go on a trip to Thailand and they disrespect a Thai spirit house, and Scout's character gets possessed by an evil spirit. This definitely isn't a new concept to horror. We've seen films like this before, you know, couple slash group of friends goes to a foreign country, does something they're not supposed to, touches something they're not supposed to, takes something they're not supposed to, and bad things happen to them. So this isn't a new concept, but this is the first time I ever saw anything like a Thai spirit house in a horror movie, and those are real things that not just in Thailand, but in Southeast Asia, they put in front of buildings and homes to appease any spirits that could, you know, bother the living. So So I thought that was a really cool idea to incorporate that into a horror movie, because while those Thai spirit houses are pretty beautiful, actually, when you look at them, they can be a little bit creepy. So I like that they played up that concept. Unfortunately though, this movie, it pretty much progresses the way you'd expect it to, and it ends the way you'd expect it to. So there's really nothing new in that sense. So it was still a decent watch. I'm still glad that I watched it. Next two movies I watched are absolute staples for the Halloween season in October. While I was doing my decorating, as you can see behind me, I watched A Nightmare Before Christmas and Hocus Pocus. Those are movies that I watch constantly throughout the month of October. They're on TV throughout the month of October on like every single channel too, so it's easy to get a watch in even if you don't own the movies. They're just great, family-friendly, Halloween-themed movies, and I'm sure most of you guys can remember watching them when you were really young like I did and just loving them. And whenever I watch those films, I like get this giddy, kind of like childlike feeling. It just makes me so excited for Halloween every time I watch it. So I always make sure I watch them not only on Halloween, which I do watch them every year for Halloween, but I always watch them towards the end of September that kind of get me in the Halloween spirit. Not that I need much help doing that, but the next thing I watched this week was a rewatch again for me, which was Train to Busan, which if any of you out there haven't seen Train to Busan, please stop what you're doing, go watch the movie and then come back, because this movie is amazing. If you're feeling burnt out on zombie movies, this is the zombie movie for you, seriously. It's a South Korean zombie film. It's a little more action-y than horror, but it's got everything. It's got scares, it's got action, it's got drama, it's got a little bit of comedy. It's got everything in it. It's gonna make you laugh. It'll pull at your heartstrings a little bit. If you don't tear up at the end, then what is wrong with you? This is a great movie, and I believe it's still on Netflix. So if you haven't seen it, you really don't have an excuse, because everybody has a Netflix. So go watch it right now. It's a requirement. Best thing about Train to Busan is the zombies themselves. The actors that that play the zombies that you kind of get to see close up, because obviously the big wide shots where you just see like the massive zombies kind of crawling all over each other, obviously that's CGI, but the zombies you do get to see close up, I don't know if they hired like contortionists or something, but like just the body acting that these people had to do looks so difficult and so trying, but they make it look so good. They do like these weird jerky things with their bodies that I definitely can't do, but they look absolutely amazing close up, and you can tell it wasn't really enhanced by like speeding up the camera or anything like that. You can tell this is just these people moving, and that's what makes it truly amazing. The next thing I watched this week was Open Windows, which is a film by Nacho Vigalondo, and it stars Elijah Wood. It's about obviously Elijah Wood, and he gets jilted out of this contest to meet his favorite actress, and a hacker named Chord comes on to his laptop and gets him to kind of kidnap the actress, I guess, without giving too much away. Basically torment her to get back at her for backing out of the dinner that he supposedly won to meet her. My summary makes no sense, and I do apologize. It's a very complicated movie, so it's really hard to summarize. But the interesting thing about this movie is it completely takes place on Elijah Wood's laptop screen. So it's very much like Unfriended, which interestingly enough, they came out the same year. Both films came out in 2014, which I thought was a really interesting coincidence given that they're both completely set on laptop screens. Open Windows takes a different approach, as it's a bit more like techie and hacker-y as opposed to supernatural. But it starts off really good. It reminds me of Phone Booth, which I can't remember when that movie came out, but it stars Colin Farrell, if I'm getting his name right, if I'm thinking of the right person. It really reminds me of that in the beginning, except taking place on the laptop. Towards the end of it, it gets a little bit complicated for my taste. Like, things just go crazy at the end, and you kind of don't know where you are towards the end of the movie, and I didn't really know what I was supposed to take away by the end because it was so complicated. But might be worth a watch, especially if you really like techie stuff, and if you like more action-y type films, because this is definitely heavier on the action as opposed to the horror. All right, and the last thing I watched this week before I sat down to film this video was Flatliners. I made sure I went and watched the original again before I went to go see the remake. I do really enjoy the original Flatliners. It has a very gothic feel to it. Like, there's a whole lot of super tall archways, and their school or their classes they're taking are in this like cathedral looking place, and there's long hallways, and the music is very dramatic choral music. It all feels very Frankenstein, which fits the premise of the movie. Now, where the remake is concerned, I think it started off really well because they kind of bring in this new aspect of the kids or the medical students getting abilities, kind of. Well, it's not so much getting abilities, but they touch on it very briefly. It's like they're saying they're unlocking parts of their brain, or like memories of stuff that they learned like a long time ago and maybe forgot about. So they kind of gain abilities that they didn't have before. Kind of also play up the desperation of these characters to succeed. They really touch on how stressful med school is. Not that I would know because I've never been to med school, but I've heard things. But they touch on that a lot, so that kind of helps with the characterization, and you really understand how desperate these characters are to make this experiment work and really make a name for themselves in the medical field. And it kind of brings up points of how desperate our generation is to be successful and to make a name for yourself in a world where a lot of things have already been done already. So I really like that, and I wish they had kept that up. They really do a good job of developing those points in the beginning, and then once the second act begins, it's really just a copy of the original film, and that's where it failed for me. So that's what I've been watching this week, or a taste of what I've been watching this week. I wanted to keep it kind of short, so I stuck to the better films that I watched this week, I should say. Once again, thank you so much, Lee, for having me on your 31 Days of October. I'm truly honored to be on your channel this week for this. A very happy October to everybody. Happy Halloween, and stay strange. Bye.
Thank you, Vicki. You got me curious about a few of those. And lastly, before we get into what I watched, let's go to my good friend Tim from Reviewed Later. We've actually done like 3 or 4 music videos together. You know, him doing the guitar and me doing the drums. And they've always been a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to what we do next. But, Tim, let them know what you watched.
What's going on, guys? It's Tim from Reviewed Later, and before I jump into what I watched this past week, I just want to thank Lee for inviting me to be a part of this video series again. It's really cool to be a part of the first episode to kind of kick it off, and I can't wait to see what other people have checked out this entire month, so I'm really looking forward to that, so thank you. So I didn't actually get to watch 5 movies every single day this past week. So I'm going to touch on the few movies that I did watch leading up to this, and then I'm also going to show off some movies that I plan on, without a doubt, watching this October. So one of the movies I watched this past week is one of the most unoriginal movies to watch during the month of October, and that is the first Halloween movie. I think this movie is an absolute masterpiece. Not only do I like John Carpenter's other films, but I feel like this is one of his best films. And the reason I really love this movie is because it's proof that you can make a movie on a low budget and make it absolutely terrifying, make it absolutely incredible, and direct it to shit without really resorting to stupid CGI or dumb jump scares or anything like that. Like, this movie feeds off of ambiguity, not knowing anything about Michael Myers. It feeds off of letting its actors act and really having drawn out scenes and not ever really showing what you really want to see. Like, it really takes its time. It gives each character their own scene, so when they do get killed, you end up caring about them. And when you do get to see Michael Myers, you fear him because all you see him do is stalk and hunt. And the only thing you know about him is that he's pure evil. You don't know any motive, you don't know why he's doing it. He doesn't get his own scene where he explains anything. And that's what makes this movie so fucking terrifying and so good. John Carpenter is one of the greatest directors of all time. So after I watched that, I was like, you know what? This is the time I'm going to watch the rest of the Halloween movies in the franchise. I've been putting it off way too long. So up until this video, I've watched Halloween 1 through 3. And my quick thoughts, Halloween 2 is good. I think that John Carpenter is missed from, like, the other. I know he wrote and produced a handful of the other films, but in a perfect world, I wish that John Carpenter had directed Halloween 1 and 2. Because Halloween 2 for me does a lot of things I wanted it to do, but then it does a lot of things I did not want it to do. Some of the things I did not want it to do were explain a motive behind Michael Myers. That twist at the end where you find out that Laurie is his sister really ruined it for me. Because, like I said in the first movie, ambiguity is key. Not knowing anything about him aside from what Dr. Loomis tells us, it makes him so terrifying. And that twist just felt really forced. And I do know that John Carpenter was really pulling at straws when he was writing Halloween 2, and it feels like it. Regardless though, I thought that the kills were great. I thought the scene where Michael Myers busts through the door was awesome. I would have liked to seen a little less hospital, but I understand that that's the most logical next step for the movie to go in, like following the first movie. I loved the fact that they fit right up next to each other, so you could watch this movie one after another, like a bang bang. But I probably won't ever find myself watching a Halloween 2 anytime soon again. And Halloween 3, I'll keep this pretty short. I loved it. I don't know why people hate that movie. Also, in a perfect world, I wish John Carpenter could have fulfilled doing what he wanted to do, which was making every year a movie centered on Halloween, but not necessarily the story of Michael Myers. I loved the fact that in Halloween 3, it's so unrelated to Halloween completely that they even have Halloween playing on the TV, because in this world, it was a movie. I thought the story was excellent. I wish John Carpenter had directed that movie as well, but I do feel like it felt the most like a John Carpenter film. Like, you could watch, you know, again, I know John Carpenter didn't direct it, but you could watch movies like They Live and Prince of Darkness and Halloween 3 all in one sitting and have it feel like a John Carpenter marathon. So I love Halloween 3, definitely going to be picking that one up. I would watch that movie many times again. And I haven't seen Halloween 4 yet, so I'll definitely get around to that. I also got to watch one of my favorite video game adaptations of a video game I've never played before, but what I'm convinced is by far the best adaptation that there is of a video game, and that is Silent Hill. If you haven't seen Silent Hill, I implore you to give it a watch. This movie holds up beyond belief. The special effects are incredible. The directing is top notch. I mean, this guy, I heard that he like messaged Konami like a ton of his fan-made edits for this movie, and eventually they were like, fine, we'll let you make the movie. I think the settings are incredible. The atmosphere is moody and it's dark, and the ash that's falling from the sky is beautiful. The subtle changes in clothes over time is awesome and subliminal. The acting's great, and the visuals are terrifying. There is some really gruesome and grotesque stuff in this movie that I don't think I've seen executed as well in a video game adaptation or even a horror movie in a really long time. Especially the scene with the triangle head guy, which again, haven't played the games, don't really know his name. He rips a girl's skin off of her clothes, and it is the most metal, gruesome thing. Like this guy directed this movie excellently. Definitely check out Silent Hill. I have not seen Silent Hill Revelations, so maybe I'll check that out this month as well. And the only other horror movie that I watched this week leading up to this episode was the horror anthology on Netflix called XX. If you don't know what it is, it's 4 horror short films directed by women, and these are 4 really solid short films. I've seen a lot of these horror anthologies like VHS, ABCs of Death, and Holidays, and all of them have so much promise, but they're never as good as they can be. I think a lot of that is when directors are given a short film, they can't tell the entire story that they want to because of the short amount of time. So what they do is they make you watch, 10 minutes of stupid fluff, and then there's a punchline at the end of the movie that makes you understand the title of the short film. And some can be really good, but sometimes it can just get very repetitive, and the punchline isn't always as good as they expect it to be. And I'm not saying that XX is any different. There are punchlines in each of these shorts, but I think that because it's 4 short films instead of having like 20 short films or 15 or 10 short films in one movie, and only having it to be 4 lets the directors have a bit more time. I think each one is 25 minutes. I think the last one might run a little longer, but the length definitely helps. I thought the stories were very original. I especially liked the short film Birthday. I think it's called Happy Birthday or Birthday. That one was the greatest. There's a really great cameo of a director. I don't want to say who it is, but definitely give it a watch. I had a really great time with it. The quality is excellent. The directing is really, really good. The special effects are great, and the stories are very original. So out of the horror anthologies that I've seen, this one definitely sits at the top for me. So unfortunately, that's all I was able to watch leading up to this episode, but I did want to go through some of the movies that I do plan on watching for the rest of the month. I'm sure these are going to pop up on other people's lists for other episodes during the month, but these are movies that I can't see myself not watching this month. So the first one is 30 Days of Night. This is one of the best vampire movies I've ever seen. One of the scariest movies too, and it's directed just beautifully, so definitely going to be checking that out. I'm also going to be checking out Jacob's Ladder. This is one of my favorite psychological thrillers of all time, and I consider this to be a horror movie because it gets dark, it gets depressing. It's also got very terrifying imagery. Tim Robbins does an incredible job in this movie. His performance is awesome. So I haven't watched this in a long ass time, and I can't wait to watch it again. I'm also going to check out The Conjuring. I thought this movie was incredible. I just picked it up for $5. Finally, I found it for a cheap price, so I can't wait to watch this movie again. When it gets closer to Halloween, of course, I'm going to watch Trick or Treat. When I watch The Conjuring, I'm probably going to want to then go back and watch other James Wan movies. So I'm going to watch Saw, of course. I have those on digital. I'm going to check out Insidious, of course. And I'm also definitely going to be checking out Dead Silence. I picked this up at Walmart for like $5. And I remember really liking it when I first saw it, so I can't wait to check it out again. I'm also going to be checking out House of the Dead and House of the Dead 2. I just picked this up on Friday. Say what you will about these movies, because I truly don't understand how people can't just have a fun time watching these movies. I think the fact that they are so bad is what makes them so good. because they're actually pretty entertaining. And I just feel bad, like, that people can't watch this movie and have a fun time. They have to criticize it to death. Like, I don't think this movie was ever intending to be really, really good. It's just a fun one. Of course, I'm gonna watch Fright Night. This is an absolute classic, and I think a masterpiece in horror comedy. And I'm also planning on checking out Children of the Corn. I bought this a long time ago. I watched it on Netflix and I loved it, so I went out and found it really cheap, and haven't watched it since, but I remember really, really loving this movie, so I want to give it a second chance. A Halloween tradition for me is watching this movie every single year, and that is Candyman. Tony Todd is amazing in this movie. The setting is my favorite part of this movie. Everything's covered in graffiti and grime, and everything's eroding. I love the mix between, like, following the main character around as she learns about this urban myth, as well as just the grotesque imagery when you do get to see Candyman. So I love this movie so much. And the last two movies I am without a doubt going to watch is one of my favorite remakes of a film I've never seen the original to, and I can only imagine that the original is really great too, but I feel like this doesn't get enough love, and that is Sorority Row. I love the idea behind this film. I love that opening scene where the guy kills the girl, not knowing that it was a joke. I thought that was just terrifying. It still freaks me out. Like, that's a really scary scenario to be in. And I think what follows it is really great too. And Carrie Fisher's in this movie. And the last movie is another tradition for me, much like Candyman. I have to watch this movie every single year, and that is Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Absolutely hilarious. Always a really fun and entertaining time. And I hold this movie up there with movies like National Lampoon Christmas Vacation, where every time I watch this movie, I pick up on a new innuendo or a new joke, because this movie's chock full of them, and sometimes they go over your head. Every time I see this movie, I always catch something that I didn't catch before. It's just so good. So there you have it. Those are the movies that I will watch this October, as well as the movies that I did watch leading up to this episode. Lee, thanks so much again for inviting me to be a part of this, and I can't wait to see everyone else's choices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. I can't wait to dive into those. Now, let's talk about 5 movies that I watched over this last week. A couple of them are new. As a matter of fact, 4 of them are movies that I have never seen before, because this year I wanted to do a lot of movies that I've never ventured into. So I'm excited about this. The first one is going to be Bottom of the World, and it's probably the bottom of the heap. It's a movie with Gina Malone. I'm a huge fan of Gina Malone. You may remember her from movies like Donnie Darko. She was recently in Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Cut, but she always chooses really quirky roles, and Bottom of the World is no different. But it's one of those mind trip type movies where, are we in a dream or are we in the reality? But it's also kind of a road trip movie. She's on a road trip at the beginning with her boyfriend, and then all these weird things start happening. Things don't add up, and she ends up missing at the beginning of the movie, and then her boyfriend's like, what the hell is going on? And it just went into some really weird places that I wasn't a big fan of, but it was on Netflix, so I checked it out. She still does a great performance though. Next up, I watched and reviewed one of my favorite all-time horror movies, Pet Sematary, because I was on such a Stephen King high after seeing it. And Pet Sematary is just a classic because it adds the aspect of emotion to horror, and I think when you do that, you get the best horror movies. And there is some genuinely creepy stuff in this movie, especially Zelda. Zelda gives me nightmares more than anybody except for maybe Michael Myers. I don't ever want to be trapped in a room with Zelda. Forget that shit. Third up, I got a movie called Tiger House with Kaya Scodelario. I hope I said her name right. I know I butchered it. Leela from Killer Flick, she says we can just call her Kaya Scott. So we're going to go with that. But this was a really fun home invasion type film. She ends up in the wrong place at the wrong time at her boyfriend's house. And her boyfriend is in the middle of, a robbery attack. And so she has to fend for herself. It's kind of a Die Hard type situation, but it was really fun. She steals the show because she's really resourceful, she's witty, and we love female characters like this. So she really nails it. The villains are pretty cliche, but you can ignore that and just enjoy her. Okay, next up, I seen It. in the theater. What an amazing movie. This movie topped my list for the year, mainly because of the kids and because of Bill Skarsgård. Bill Skarsgård pulled out a performance that is like on the Heath Ledger level, if you ask me. Especially that opening scene in the sewer really just creeped me out because, you know, he's playing along with the kid, smiling, doing the whole popcorn thing, and then all of a sudden his face turns from like cheer to just this cold, dead stare. And right away, you knew that this movie was gonna be really creepy. And I enjoyed the hell out of it. Okay, my last movie for the week is The Ice Cream Truck. And I wanted to mention this movie because it is one of those really low budget independent films that only gets a VOD release. This is the type of movie we'll never see in the theater just because of the budget and the people involved. You know, they're not up there at like, you know, say Warner Brothers level or Sony level. So that doesn't mean the movie isn't as good as the stuff that we see at the theaters. As a matter of fact, it's excellent. It made my top 15 of the year. I enjoyed the hell out of it. It is a slasher film with an ice cream truck driver that is completely insane. And what's great is they don't give you much at all as far as his backstory goes. So that makes it even more interesting. Really loved Deanna Russo as the lead. She was really interesting throughout because she's not your typical final girl. You can tell that there's some things going on upstairs that don't really add up. But if you want to know more about that one, definitely check out my review because it was a really interesting film. I really enjoyed it. So anyway, guys, that is the wrap up for the first week of 31 Days of October. Kind of the primer episode because most of these movies we saw in September because it's only October 2nd. But I always like to start off with a primer episode. And I want to thank my guests, Tim from Reviewed Later, Vicki from Nightmare Maven, and Zach from Cavern of Terror. I'm gonna post a link to their channels below. Be sure to check them out. I want every one of you to subscribe to their channels because they make amazing content and they love horror. So anyway, guys, post in the comments what you watched. Looking forward to hearing it. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Have a great day and Drumdum out.